before we went to the floors, they call it, or the not in the ICU, like the part of basically the part of the hospital you get to before you get to go home. They wanted him to be he had to be on the Trilogy ventilator. He had to be weaned off the IV meds, and he had to be stable enough to handle open suction. So those were kind of the things we had to work towards. But when he got his G-tube surgery, recovery was really hard because it totally impacted his respiratory status. The first few days were really hard because the respiratory therapist would have to come in and bag him, I don't know how many times a day, because all of a sudden if we would move him and he would be in pain, he would hold his breath, and all of a sudden his sats would just plummet. Hey. But as soon as that recovery was looking better and better, we knew that, I would say that was probably the first time when I was like, we might get to go home by the end of this year. It might actually happen for us, which was so, like, my goal, honestly, the thing that kept me going the whole time was, if I just asked the universe, I'm like, if you could take us home for Christmas, I will survive this. If we can get home for Christmas, we will be okay. Like, that was the goal the whole time. And I swear my prayers were answered because we did. We made it home 10 days before Christmas. Yeah, we did. And so once he recovered from his G-tube surgery, things started to move in a better direction. And in the beginning of November, first week of November, we ended up going to a new unit. And that was a huge jump for us because we had already been doing most of Arden's care in the PICU. The nurses would joke like, "Oh, Rael and Brody are here, we can go sit down." And then on the floors in the other unit, we continued to do most of his care, and we started planning for going home actually. So, it was kind of silly. I joked that they made us checklists like I make my students in school, because they had like an Arden going home checklist of all the skills that Brody and I had to be able to do, and it was a 2-page checklist of all the things that we had to be able to do before we could take him home. So, there were, we had to be able to do all his trach care, which we obviously already knew how to do. We had to know how to bag and still suction. We had to have trach CPR.
2 trach changes.
We had to each be able to do 2 trach changes without assistance from any of the medical staff. And then so basically they had told us we had to complete our training before taking him home. And then once training was complete, then you had to go through like getting home care stuff ready and all that kind of thing. But there were so many barriers to our training too, because at that time, COVID protocols were changing all the time. So all of a sudden, one of the days they said, one of our skills was that we could take him for a walk down the hallway. Well, all of a sudden, you weren't allowed to leave your unit anymore. So it was like, okay, well, how do we get that skill if we're not allowed to do it? And then near the end, when we had to take him for 3 visits outside of the hospital.
Yep.
So we took him across the street to the little apartment we were renting. And then one of the days that we were supposed to take him out, that morning they said, oh, they've canceled all passes out of the hospital. And we were like, well, how do we finish our training?
Well, we had already had the date set in mind that we were leaving the 15th.
Oh yeah, we have a really, really great home care case manager here in Beaver Lodge. And she really had helped us, connect with the team in Edmonton and plan out all of Arden's, all of his needs for coming home and all of the paperwork side of things, I guess. And essentially, the hospital usually decides when you get to come home. And Brody and I just said, we're going home on the 15th, so make it happen. And we pushed really, really hard to get, oh baby. So yeah, essentially we prepped everything to come home. A lot of the things that they gave us a general outline of what we were supposed to do, and we just started researching everything ourselves. And they said, okay, you're going to have caregivers, you're going to have to do self-managed care, because there's not a home care agency in your area that does this kind of home care. So we just started figuring it all out. And, when they said, oh, you have to get your self-managed care course, and you take the training with that, and then you have to open a bank account, and then the government provides you funds for, hiring your employees and stuff like that. We just went ahead and opened the bank account without having the training because we knew how to do it. And we were like, okay, we'll just get all this stuff in order. And it really did help because a lot of the stuff the hoops that we had to jump through to get home, we just took the initiative and did it ourselves because we knew it would happen faster if we did. So it worked out really well. And anytime Arden would get a different procedure or there was different skills to be learned for his care, we just kind of jumped right in and were like, let us do it, teach us how. And we just were really hands-on that whole time, which was really helpful. Essentially, we took on the motto that if it's attached to our kid, we're gonna learn how to use it right now. Mm-hmm. And that's what we did. So that really helped us get home. They actually, respirology said that kids like Arden don't typically go home as quickly as he did, which for us, we were there for 7.5 months and that felt like an eternity. So for us to hear that, we were like, pfft. But apparently it takes a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
Usually. But you're a champ. Yeah. You're tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then coming home was so good because we didn't know how he was going to handle the car ride. That was like the biggest thing that was worrisome for us because we thought, well, he's never, like the only car ride he took was literally across the street because it was too cold to walk him in his stroller across the street to the apartment we were staying in. And so he ended up tolerating it very well. When Arden travels, he has to be on what's called an inline HME. So it's just a heat moisture exchange. It's just a little piece that goes on his trach to kind of maintain some of the humidity that he's breathing because we can't use the humidifier when he's traveling. So just the vent and his HME, and we didn't know how he would tolerate being on that for that many hours. And you ended up doing really well. You did. Yeah. He only had one DSAT while he was traveling on that drive home, and it was because he pooped and got mad. So he did really well. And Brody and Brody's family and his sisters mainly organized the whole kind of reverse parade on our road when we got home, and that was a big surprise to me. So when we drove onto our road, everybody from our family and friends and community were parked out there and to welcome us home with signs and balloons and just hooting and hollering and so excited for us, and that was so incredible because I hadn't been home for so long. It was like I was away from home. So Arden was in hospital for 230 days, and so I hadn't been home for 237 days, and it was so exciting just to finally, like, you think when you have a baby you're gonna bring him home in 2 days, not 230. So when we got you home, it was just so amazing. Yeah. It was so good. And obviously COVID has made everything a little bit different. We don't get to show him off in public as much as we would like to, but we're just so happy to be home. And he's safe here, and he's happy here, and he's thriving here. He loves his little life here. You do. And he's just happier than we've ever seen him. Being home is just, it's the best place for him. It really is.
Yeah, it is.